Hey there, this is Seth Williams from REtipster.com, and today we're going to talk about the number one reason why land investors fail. The first time I heard about the land flipping business, when I really took the time to understand what it was all about, it seemed like the biggest no-brainer investment strategy I'd ever heard of. The concept was so simple, and when I realized I could find mind-blowing deals and make serious money with such a basic type of property, I couldn't believe this wasn't a more well-known mainstream business model that everyone and their brother was doing. Make no mistake about it, the land investing business is a crazy profitable investment strategy, and it really does deserve more attention from the masses, but at the same time, I've found that a lot of people get into this business with a big underlying misconception that it's easy to find deals, easy to get them sold, easy to manage the business, easy to make money. And the problem with that word easy is that it's a very subjective word. As someone who has tried their hand at several other business opportunities before the land business, I can tell you that comparatively speaking, land really is easier than most of the other business models out there. However, to simply say that it's easy, period, would be a gross misrepresentation of reality. So let's try to develop the right mindset here. When most people get started in the land investing business, they're coming from years of experience working a full-time day job. And it's precisely how I got started. But the problem with this kind of background is that most day jobs come with certain luxuries, believe it or not, that almost everyone takes for granted. For example, the average employee is expected to focus on a handful of key responsibilities in a much larger organization without worrying about everything that happens in the overall scheme of the business. They almost never have to work on weekends, or at least there are certain designated days of the week that they know they don't have to work. And they're always allowed to unplug from their job after they leave the office. They don't have to think about it all through the day and night, even when they're not in the office. And they aren't held responsible or accountable for all of the company's problems. And they also don't get to share in the risks or the rewards when things go poorly or when they go well. On the flip side, when you start your own business, even one as straightforward as a land investing business, you're effectively running an entire company as one person. And even if your company consists of 2 or 3 people from the outset, if you're lucky enough to find a good business partner, running a company is a completely different ballgame than what most people are accustomed to. There are a lot of moving pieces to keep track of. You'll encounter some really big questions in vast areas of uncharted territory, and nobody is going to spoon feed the answers to you. It takes serious work to connect the dots on your own. And it's possible that you'll spend days, weeks, even months working on some aspects of your business with absolutely no financial payoff to show for it. And there's some very real startup costs that you'll have to cover at the outset, and they're only going to yield rewards if you execute each step carefully and correctly. And ultimately, at the end of the day, there is no guarantee of success. Even if you do everything right, it's still possible that the results will not be what you expect. And for a lot of people, these concepts I just listed off simply do not compute. Every so often, I hear from someone who is frustrated by the fact that they've put in X number of hours or X number of dollars and it hasn't resulted in X amount of profit. And as somebody who's spent several years trading hours for dollars in a day job, I fully understand the difficulty of changing this mindset. The proposition of no guarantees doesn't sound appealing to anybody, but that's exactly what comes with the territory when you become an entrepreneur. When you're running a business, there are no promised paychecks that accumulate by the hour. There is a ton of work that simply needs to be done by someone, and your customers don't care how much of your time or money it consumes. All they care about is the value that you can deliver to them at the closing table. And the good news is, when land investors get paid, they tend to get paid very, very well. But these paychecks don't materialize by simply taking action. They materialize by taking the right actions. Everybody wants a simple 1 + 1 = 2 system to follow, and to some extent, I think these systems do exist in the world, but even when you're following a proven set of instructions, there are still dozens of tiny little variables that, when tweaked in certain directions, can have a significant impact, for better or worse, on the end result. So let's talk about what you don't hear in the sales pitch. So most people, when they explain the business of flipping real estate, they explain it in kind of a 2-step process. Step 1 is buy low. Step 2, sell high. Pretty simple. right? Well, let's dissect this a little bit and talk about what is actually baked into this first simple step of buying low. In the land flipping business, the acquisition process usually involves a series of steps that look something like this. Step 1, you get a list. Step 2, you sort the list. Step 3, you send out your marketing campaign, whether that's mail or texting or cold calling or whatever you choose to do. Step 4, you start fielding the responses as they come in. Step 5, you start making and then finalizing offers. Step 6, once those offers are accepted, you complete your final round of due diligence and get ready to close. And then step 7, you close the deal. And that's just the first half of this process. And each one of those steps have a lot of different things baked inside of them. So while it may sound fairly straightforward, there's just a lot more to this that we have to unpack. I mean, when we start working through each step, we'll find that each of these stages can be filled with obstacles and pitfalls that can derail the whole process if we aren't careful. For example, let's just consider for a minute what it takes to do this very first step of simply getting a list. Well, there's a lot of different directions you can go with this, but in my experience, I've usually done one of two things. One option is to get the list from a real estate data service, which makes it really easy to find the information and filter it and download it. There's a lot of different data services out there to choose from. I've reviewed a lot of them. Or another option, like when I got started, is I got my list directly from the county, specifically the delinquent tax list, which presented its own unique series of headaches to deal with. And there are really several consequences, both good and bad, that will result from whichever one of these options you pick. For example, let's say you're trying to get your list from the county, like a delinquent tax list. So while this list can be very powerful and very effective at getting some early wins, if you've ever tried to get one of these lists, you probably already know a lot of the challenges that you'll have to deal with. After you call enough counties, you'll inevitably find that some county workers will have no idea what you're talking about. Some county workers will give you the wrong list. Some counties will charge too much for the list. Some counties won't provide the list in the right format, so they'll give it to you, but then it's a huge pain to work with. And some counties just won't give you the list at all. So there's a lot of challenges if you decide to go that direction. And alternatively, there can be a lot of other hidden issues that lurk in the background if you're trying to use a data service, which is supposedly the easy way. Some county databases may be old or outdated. Some county databases could be incomplete or inaccurate, and there's no clear way to know until you just get the data and start using it. And some data services are far too expensive for a beginner to justify, and most databases will not come with current or accurate delinquent tax data if that's something you care about. Not everybody does, but if you do, that could be problematic for you. And if you don't understand how to filter the data properly, then your marketing efforts are going to be watered down and you'll end up wasting untold amounts of money. So, as you can see, whichever method you pick of this very first step of just getting a list, there is much more to the story. And as you continue working through each subsequent step after this, you'll find that each one has a lot of little obstacles to get over. And if you aren't aware of all the difficulties that could come up along the way, any one of these problems could kind of sabotage your success. And the land investing business model can be extremely powerful when you follow each stage until completion, but still, you'll only see these results firsthand if you have the endurance to overcome these obstacles and not give up at the first or second or third or 10th sign of trouble. A land investor can only find success if they're able to see the bigger picture and persevere, and a lot of new land investors frankly just can't see it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about luck and experience. I think it's important to remember that all these little problems and questions and bumps in the road are 100% normal. Every business has them. When you've worked in this business for years and you've seen your fair share of great deals, you eventually learn what not to do. Making all the right business moves starts to become second nature, and you'll start taking all the right steps almost without thinking about it. For some of the more experienced land investors out there, I think it's easy to forget about the mountain of challenges that they faced in the beginning. It's easy for them to oversimplify the process when they're explaining it to others because they're just so far removed from what it was like when they were just getting started. Seasoned pros tend to forget about the fear and the uncertainty that came with not knowing what they were doing. And to some extent, I think it's true in any profession that the more pro a person gets, the more disconnected they can become from just how many difficulties there were for them when they were getting started. And in his book, The Art of Explanation, Lee Lefevre refers to it as the curse of knowledge. When you get to the point where you know a lot about something, it's hard to remember what it was like back when you didn't know squat. People with lots of experience make it sound easy, and for the most part, it's hard to fault them for it, because after all, they've built up a massive mental database of knowledge and personal experience, and they're not really making this up. For them, and the small handful of people on their level, it actually is pretty easy. But what about the 99% of other investors who are still trying to figure things out? A novice only knows what they're told, and while following instructions can be instrumental in setting a person on the right track, the real learning, like the stuff that actually sticks, oftentimes doesn't happen until they actually start doing the work themselves. And even with all the instruction in the world, most of us don't fully understand how much we don't know. We have to experience a few painful missteps firsthand before the lessons are really going to solidify. Now, it's also worth noting that most land investors who have survived and thrived over many years, the reason they made it that far is because they had some kind of lucky break early on. And when a land investor follows the proper steps and they find a profitable deal and they see it through the full land flipping life cycle, they will experience the thrill of making money from a land deal. And this early win is an incredible high. Now, on the other hand, it's an incredible low to do all this same work, spend the time and the money and the energy, and then not find a profitable land deal. And whether an investor experiences this incredible high or incredible low can greatly impact their decision to continue or quit their land investing business. And when I reflect back on my first year in this business, I honestly might not have survived if I hadn't found a profitable deal in my first few campaigns. And I knew at the time how crucial it was for me to see positive results early on. So I proceeded painstakingly slow, and I was a perfectionist in everything I did. And my perfectionism from the start ended up paying off. But even so, I think there was a little bit of luck involved. And while hard work often leads to more luck, it doesn't necessarily guarantee success. It is very easy to work very hard at the wrong things. I know this better than most, okay? I've done this more times than I'd like to admit. And sometimes success is about just being in the right place at the right time, whether it's by chance or divine intervention. But the one thing we can control to increase our chances of luck is to ensure we're showing up and doing our part to try to be in the right place at the right time. So given this importance of early wins and how big a role it plays in the future of our business, it's very important to focus all your effort on finding solid, profitable deals as soon as possible after you get started. Try very hard to avoid unprofitable activities that waste time. And there are a lot of these unprofitable activities out there, believe me. If any activity won't lead you directly to a profitable deal, then don't do it. We all have a finite amount of patience, and the clock is ticking, and any normal person is eventually going to become demoralized if they don't see tangible results in a reasonable amount of time. So stay keenly aware of this, and if you're doing something that's not leading you to put yourself in the way of a profitable deal, try not to do those things, because it's not going to help you. So why do some land investors fail? Well, there are a lot of things that can contribute to a land investor's success or lack thereof, but if I had to boil quote-unquote failure down to one single thing, I would probably say the amount of work is what kills off the dream for many new land investors before they ever find their groove. It takes a great deal of effort to start and grow a land investing business. And while I firmly believe land investing is less risky and less complicated than most real estate investing niches in the world today, it still requires some serious work, which is overlooked by many when they're getting into this business. It doesn't necessarily have to stay this work intensive. Eventually you can build a team and find better ways to be efficient and automate things, but when you're just getting started and you're all by yourself, there's no denying it takes a lot of heavy lifting to get this machine built, oiled up, gassed up, and then turned on and firing on all cylinders. others. Most aspiring land investors get turned on to this business idea because of its simplicity and the massive opportunity for finding insanely profitable deals. And make no mistake, it is an amazingly compelling concept. I still get excited about it today. Most of us can agree that buying a property for a fraction of its true market value and then reselling it for a jaw-dropping profit is a pretty cool concept. But what you don't hear about in all those gleaming testimonials and sales pitches, or perhaps you do hear it, but you fail to recognize its significance, is that for every success story, that person usually spent a solid year, maybe longer, educating themselves, learning a lot of lessons, and probably fighting a long uphill battle filled with moments that tested their resolve and would have sent a lot of people running in the other direction. Every step forward takes a great deal of energy, time, stamina, and even money to work through, and for many, the amazing results don't necessarily happen on their first try. Sometimes people get lucky, but more often than not, a person will have to dig even deeper after their first attempt to reevaluate and alter their approach where necessary, and then try to execute the process all over again. And while we're on this subject of the challenges in this business, let's not forget that these challenges are ultimately what makes success so satisfying. This is a business that anyone can do, but many people will not stick with it. Not because it doesn't work, but because many people aren't cut out for the entrepreneurial life. And you know what? That's okay. We all love thinking about the upside potential of self-employment, but the downside is just as real, and it's not nearly as fun to deal with. So when it comes to the success mindset versus the failure mindset, as someone in the education space for land investors, I've had the benefit of seeing many people who have made it and made it really well in this business. And I've also seen a lot of people who just chose not to stick with it. Between the two groups, I've noticed some distinct differences in the way each type of person approaches problems. People who fail in this business tend to get stuck in one place because they feel paralyzed by their lack of knowledge. However, people who succeed are energized by the information gaps, and they find a lot of satisfaction in discovering the answers to their questions. A lot of people who fail and give up at this business do so because they're not able to move forward without getting permission from somebody like me or another experienced land investor to take each new step along the way. People who succeed are fascinated by the process, and they know how to take all ideas into consideration and think independently. They aren't afraid to try new hybrid approaches and discover new ways to get the results that they're looking for. People who fail and quit see the world in black and white. When one approach doesn't work with ease, they conclude that, well, I guess this doesn't work, and they throw in the towel and search for something that sounds easier. But the people who succeed see the world in many different dimensions. When one approach doesn't work, they challenge themselves to figure out why, and they test new ideas, they take new steps forward, and when one approach doesn't work, they learn how to isolate their mistakes and never repeat them again. Successful land investors take responsibility for building and running their own business. They know when and how to ask questions, but they don't wait around for someone else to explain every last detail and put all the pieces together before they're finally going to take action. If you want to find success as a land investor, take the initiative. Work to comprehend the essentials, be sure to tweak and refine your approach when changes are necessary, and no matter what, keep pushing forward.